This video is brought to you thanks to the support of my Patreons. If you like my work, if you want to support it, or if you want to get access to a bunch of perks, I'll put a link in the description box. In the Epstein files, the word France appears 15,000 times. Paris appears 67,000 times. And yes, the same documents appeared several times, but still 67,000 times, that's a lot of mentions. And that is for a reason. Jeffrey Epstein had a flat, if we can call this a flat, in Paris. It was bought for $3 million in 2001, and he made it look exactly like his other properties. A table with pictures of Epstein posing with the rich and famous who was visible from the entrance. The rooms, including the toilets, were covered with pictures of women's bodies. His Parisian flat was a place where he allegedly invited both guests and victims. It allowed him to anchor his presence in Europe and more specifically within the Parisian elite. Ghislaine Maxwell, who was part of the international high society, was actually born in France and spent her early years there. Her father, Robert Maxwell, had business interests in France, including stakes in a major TV channel. When it comes to Epstein, we can say that 3 French individuals facilitated his integration into the country. One was named Epstein's best friend forever. The other 2 were once referred to by him as family, and one was even mentioned in his testament. Through them, Epstein began investing in France and gradually developed a local network of mathematicians, politicians, cultural elites, and business leaders. Paris functioned both as a refuge from and a continuation of his criminal activities. It was also the city where he spent his last days of freedom before flying back to New York to be incarcerated. For those of you who don't know, I'm French, je suis française, and in the last few weeks, French investigative journalists have dug deep into the Epstein files to draw a portrait of the network's French connections. I am here to present their findings to you. I will strictly rely on facts and reports produced by professional investigative journalists. Everything is fact-checked and testimonies and allegations will be presented as such, so you can trust me. My name is Alice, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Allez, c'est parti! So I mentioned earlier that 3 French individuals helped Jeffrey Epstein build his network in France, and I'll start with the most influential one, the person who visited him 70 times during his time in jail and who also put an end to his life in prison in 2022. This man is called Jean-Luc Brunel. Here he is. Jean-Luc Brunel met Jeffrey Epstein at parties in New York City, and they quickly developed a close relationship. He was regularly invited to Epstein's private island and appears in many photos with him and Ghislaine. Epstein and Brunel's friendship seemed to stem from a shared passion for exploiting women, especially very young women. Jean-Luc Brunel was the director of Karim Models, a major modeling agency in Europe. He would scout cities in search of new faces for his agency. The models who were offered contracts were also expected to attend his parties with his elite friends. Some models explained that they felt pressured to take part in these gatherings in order to keep their contracts. Other models felt that joining his parties might help them secure a contract. That is exactly what happened to a 20-year-old Swedish woman that we'll call A. She arrived in Paris to study art history and live as an au pair. The mother of the child she cared for, a former model herself, suggested she met with an agency. There she was received by Gérald Marie, whom she described as, quote, a man with long curly brown hair, wearing jeans and a denim jacket. I immediately recognized this name because I would occasionally see him on French TV growing up. He was the European head of Elite Models, one of the big 3, along with Ford Models and IMG Models. In preparation for this video, I rewatched a 1999 interview from a popular and provocative talk show where he was invited, and I wanted to show you some of those images and describe them a little bit, because what's going on over there is wild, to say the least. At that time, Marie had been accused of taking advantage of women as the head of Elite Europe. He was invited onto the show to share his side of the story with 2 models present who seemed happy to defend him. As you can see, the models don't have seats. They are squeezed in between the men, who don't hesitate to make some obviously suggestive comments. The host, Thierry Ardisson, jokes that given the topic of the conversation, it would be better to avoid asking the model to sit on Jean d'Ormesson's lap. The woman sitting next to Ardisson is a former model who is there simply to look pretty, play dumb at times, and make a few comments here and there. It was quite common on French TV to have a beautiful woman sit next to the host and just smile and etc. her. Throughout the interview, Gérald Marie gets to defend himself with arguments that the guests gladly nod along to. Each guest defends him by stressing that the behavior he's accused of was common in other industries and therefore not something people should make a fuss about. Now, it's striking how the narrative has since flipped, with Me Too spreading into many of the same spheres that these guests represent, including sports, music, and drama. But anyway, let's go back to A's story. So Gérald Marie saw her, he found her very beautiful, but since she had no experiences, he advised her to go to another agency, the one run by Jean-Luc Brunel. So she went there immediately. She says Brunel welcomed her in an apparently charming and friendly manner. He complimented her looks and suggested she go that very evening to the countryside with him, friends, and models for a photo session as tests. The meeting was set for 9 p.m. at an apartment in Paris. When she arrived, she found Brunel, Gérald Marie, and also a man she described as tall with black slicked back hair, later identified as Etienne Desrois Deschandelies. Well, this name is so uncommon, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but this is giving nobility. And in fact, this guy owned a castle in Normandy where the group planned to spend the weekend. They left at around 11 p.m. and stopped for dinner around midnight. She says the atmosphere quickly turned sexual. Gérald Marie showed a book with escanoted photos. Everyone was laughing, but she felt more and more uncomfortable and started to think that maybe this whole plan was not a good idea. She says she told Brunel she wanted to leave, and he replied that she had nothing to fear, that she was under his protection. During the night, Brunel knocked on her door and suggested taking photos outside. They went in his car, and he asked her how much she earned as an au pair. She answered 500 to 600 francs a month, and he replied, "Why stay an au pair? You could easily get a contract with me for 30,000 francs a month." She says then that he tried to kiss her and put his hand between her leg. She said no, and he told her that he could leave her outside. She said she ran back to her room and locked herself in, but that he later appeared through a hidden passage connecting the rooms. Quote, "He grabbed my arm and pulled me through the closets. I said no the whole time, but he me on his bed." End of the quote. She went back to her room and barricaded herself. The next morning, she remembers seeing a garden like those of Versailles. At breakfast, she says no one spoke to her, that Brunel and Gérald Marie discussed organizing an orgy that evening and insisted that she take part in it. She asked a young American model for help and was eventually driven to a train station 9 kilometers away. At the station, she wrote, quote, "I'm in a small village, but I'm still alive." She kept that written account and her train ticket and later said, quote, "My modeling career ended before it even began." She told no one about the incident for years. After the Epstein case became public in 2019 and authorities issued a call for witnesses concerning Brunel, she wrote to the prosecutor, was interviewed by police, and said she had proof, which she located 2 years later in a suitcase she had kept at home. Now, this story shows that Jeffrey Epstein did not invent anything, whether it was the setting, the strategy, or the manipulation. It seems obvious that Jean-Luc Brunel gave him some advice. For example, the habit of inviting young women to their home or to a friend's home under so-called professional pretenses is something Epstein also did. Like Brunel, he used the promise of photo shoots for aspiring models to lure them into their offices, apartments. In Brunel's case, a castle. In Epstein's case, an island. From there, they would test the models to see how they responded to questions, how much they were willing to undress, and determine who could be taken advantage of and who couldn't. But keep in mind that these strategies are not limited to those two men. Me Too exposed a lot of cases, similar cases of men using that type of strategies to exploit women seeking professional opportunities. You see, it's not surprising that Epstein's Paris apartment opened onto a table covered with photos of him alongside politicians, business leaders, and academics. It was a way to signal his social status to guests and impress potential victims. For the record, we still know very little of what happened in that Paris apartment. We can only speculate, but some French organizations are calling for an investigation to be reopened. Prosecutors have responded positively, but they say that they struggle to find testimony because models are scattered across the world. I personally tried to contact a couple of women who worked with Brunel to share their experiences, but They said they did not feel comfortable doing so, and I totally understand that. Some women did come forward though. Ticia Huisman, who was a Dutch model at the time, was invited by her agency to move directly into Brunel's home because she was considered special and high potential. One night he offered her a drink and drugged her so he could assault her. According to a documentary filmed in the late 1980s by CBS, this happened more than once, leading Eileen Ford, who ran Ford Models, to end all collaborations with him. Actually, some criticized her for acting far too late since many agencies had already been warned about Brunel, but honestly, when you understand how the modeling world works, especially how it worked in the 1990s, you realize exploitation was extremely common. Many agencies took advantage of models by placing them in precarious situations, housing them in apartments rented far above market rates, taking large cuts of their earnings, and putting them into debt whenever possible. Kept in this vulnerable position, competing against one another, and far from family and friends, they became easy targets for men like Brunel and many others. With those tactics, Brunel bragged about having slept with 3,000 women, while Epstein claimed that he slept with 1,000 women of those 3,000. If it was not obvious already, the two were besties, and I guess this is a form of male bonding, I'm not sure. Like Epstein, Brunel was eventually imprisoned and died 3 years after his friend. He protected him until the end, despite telling prosecutors in 2013 that he was willing to cooperate. He did not in the end. So yeah, we are done with Brunel for now. We have seen how modeling agencies were structured in ways that kept many models in states of precarity, making exploitation easier. This allowed individuals like Brunel and others to take advantage of models, send them to islands, castles, and threaten their career if they refused to. Okay, now let's move on to two of Epstein's other associates. I put them together because they are father and daughter: Jack Lang, former Minister of Culture and director of the Arab Institute in France, and Caroline Lang. The latter was on Epstein's testament. He described the Lang as a family. He was introduced to them by Woody Allen. The records concerned in particular his daughter, Caroline Lang, a French cinema industry executive who earlier had a brief acting career. At 64, she had spent nearly 3 decades at the head of the French and Francophone division of the company Warner Bros. Television. At the beginning of January, she was appointed executive director of the Independent Producers Union. She was also a board member of the Série Mania Festival, and until recently, a member of the Advanced Funding Commission of the CNC, and she was also committed to fighting gender inequality in her professional field. To put it simply, she's a big deal. According to the documents, Caroline Lang met Epstein around 2012. She said they shared an interest in art and exhibitions, and that Epstein proposed creating a fund to invest in emerging artists. Corporate records showed that on the 22nd of July in 2016, they created an offshore company called Tritony LLC in St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands, in which she held half the shares. Banking information transmitted to US authorities indicated that the company's stated purpose was to acquire artworks, so technically nothing related to Epstein's other activities. She stated she had not declared the offshore company to French tax authorities and described herself as having been naive about the legal implications. Emails contained in the released files indicated that she organized numerous meetings between Epstein and her father, Jack Lang. For example, in 2018, after Jack Lang publicly defended Woody Allen on television, she wrote to Epstein, who answered that her father did a great job. Other correspondence showed that in March 2015, Jack Lang and his wife contacted Epstein about the possible purchase of a riad in Marrakesh owned by acquaintances. When Epstein asked the price, Jack Lang replied that it was 5.4 million euros offshore. This family seems to have a bit of a problem with taxation, it seems. Asked about this exchange, he said he did not clearly remember it and believed that he had simply relayed the seller's expectations. I can keep going for hours. I really selected the best bits for you. The last thing I want to share with you is that some documents also showed that in 2018, a foundation belonging to Epstein paid close to $58,000 to close associates of Jack Lang to fund a documentary film project titled Jack Lang, La Traversée du siècle. Yeah, you heard me right. He asked Epstein to fund his ego trip documentary. The film was never broadcasted after the Epstein scandal, and trust me, I tried everything I could to find it, but no, I couldn't. They shelved it forever, it seems. So these were the big things, but as I mentioned before, Jack Land also asked Epstein to pay for trips, taxis and flights. Epstein had a few cars in Paris. All of this happened thanks to mostly Caroline, who kept close contact with him. Some emails, like one where she wrote "Big Kiss," led to rumors that maybe this was more than just a friendship. Caroline Long stated that there was no romantic relationships, that he had supported the family after the death of her sister in 2013. She said that after learning from press reports that he had been convicted in 2008 of procuring minors, he told her he has paid his debt and compensated victims, which she believed. She said she was flabbergasted when new allegations became public in 2019. In the weeks after Epstein's death that year, she requested the liquidation of their joint company and asked not to receive any assets from it. Jack Land stated he did not consider Epstein a friend and said he just knew him through Woody Allen. He described Epstein as, quote, a true fan of art and culture, and said that learning later information about him had been a shock. These two are part of the same family for a reason, aren't they? But beyond their individual involvement, it is clear that the Lang family was Epstein's connection to the Parisian cultural and political elites. The men craved those types of connections, the old money, high society, the nepotism, the opposite of his story, really. His apartments, his style are emblematic to me of new rich individuals who want to signal old money but don't really have the codes. So it just ends up looking weird, exaggerated. But maybe that was intended. Epstein seemed to enjoy his life in Paris. He would come back very often, seeking to learn more about the art scene, the politics, and so on. Among names mentioned in the files are Fabrice Hadian, senior diplomat whose name appears more than 200 times in the files, with exchanges dating to 2010 when he worked at the United Nations. Messages suggested he shared diplomatic documents with Epstein. He denies wrongdoing and requested respect for the presumption of innocence. Marine Le Pen, leader, let's say, of the National Rally, if not exactly the case, but anyway, her name also appears in the files, mostly in indirect contexts, such as discussions in correspondence between others. It is clear that Epstein was quite interested in her party. We know that Epstein was friends with Steve Bannon, so maybe there was a connection there, who knows? Don't have clear information for that. Olivier Collomb, a former diplomat, a political advisor, he appears frequently in the files due to his long correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein. He was kind of like a go-between, making introductions between Epstein and some French figures. I need to read you one of his email conversations with Epstein, just so that you see the complicity and the male bonding going on there. This email was found by Mediapart. On June 17, Epstein wrote to him that he was on his private Caribbean island, quote, with an aquarium full of girls, including, quote, 2 Russians. Collomb replied, I would love the view. The criminal then compares the girls to shrimps because, quote, you throw away the head and keep the body. The exchange then took a racist turn. Olivier Collomb explained that he prefers white women, and Jeffrey Epstein said he could not stand the smell of a black shrimp. Collomb then added that he was flying to Russia the next day where, quote, there is surely a lot of fresh fish. What this connection shows is that Jeffrey Epstein did not have to beg to meet members of the French cultural and political elites. He could rely on a circle of close friends who were eager to introduce him to others. Ultimately, the French branch of his network closely resembled its American counterpart. Epstein used his social and financial assets to generate interest and facilitate transactions. Women and girls were a significant asset when it came to attracting the attention of powerful men. There were also what Hélène Devin called decapitated shrimps in a column for Libération, a phrase meant to refocus attention on the thousands of victims who still live with the trauma of what happened to them. One of those victims being Virginia or Jeffrey, who spoke out and fought defamation accusations, paving the way for other women to come forward. It is thanks to these women that journalists and prosecutors devoted time and resources to investigate Epstein's network and reveal how interconnected all his activities were. Epstein knew which card to play depending on the person in front of him. He bragged about his women to some, he avoided the topic with others who might have been put off by it, but he never truly hid it. He never concealed what he was doing, which is why there were so many photographs and why there were images of women displayed throughout his houses and apartments. So what's gonna happen now? Well, France had some of the files for a while, since 2022-23, to investigate French nationals and contacts. Some trials have already happened. Brunel was sent to jail. A few weeks ago, Paris prosecutor Laure Becquot announced that 2 investigations had been opened to go through the files and seek potential activity. Jack Lang has resigned from the Arab World Institute in Paris, despite initially protesting the idea. Caroline Lang also quit her roles. What's clear though is that this case is a perfect example of how gender violence and capitalist greed, the two are deeply intertwined. The exploitation of women is not a framework, it is part of the mechanism. The women were providing the sort of services that allow these men to deepen their professional relationships. You see, it's easier to secure a mutually beneficial partnership in good company, in the presence of attractive people, while someone is giving you a massage or more. That's why, to a much lesser degree, big corporations organize dinner parties with potential clients, hoping they'll sign the deal in the following days. The entertainment bit is crucial. But that's also why women are more than welcome in bars and clubs, because there's an expectation that men will not only come, but buy them drinks. Without knowing it, the women are working for the bar. Bars and clubs need them. The models Epstein invited on his island were also working for him. They were exploited, unpaid, and abused workers. They are the victims of those whose money and power has grown from exploiting others directly or indirectly. And you've seen it, a bunch of them have philanthropic foundations or give money to each other's foundations to buy back their guilt. This is a sick world we live in, and you know what? This story, it should radicalize you. It should radicalize you against patriarchy, against corporate greed. I don't want you to live this video with despair or sadness, no. I want you to feel angry. The type of angry that makes you want to throw the table and start something new. I'll leave you with that for now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. This sort of videos, I say it every single time, but I think it's important to say it, are way more difficult to make, to research than the usual ones. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to like if you thought this was valuable, to subscribe, to hype. You know, I like to say that this channel, those videos are a form of therapy for me in a way. I don't talk about myself in them, but I don't know, doing the research and being able to put that in the world and demand a little bit of accountability feels like the sort of therapy that I need. It really helps me on an individual level to move on, to move forward. So yeah, I hope it's the same for you. Just before I leave, I want to say a big thank you to my patrons. This video is not sponsored, which means that it was made possible thanks to the support of my patrons. On Patreon, we have a bunch of things, a lovely community, a Discord chat, you have early access to the videos, ad-free videos, of course, and yeah, a lot of other things that I can't remember now, but I'll put a link in the description box if you want to learn more. So yes, big thank you to my patrons and a special thank to top tier patrons. And yeah, my battery died, so I just wanted to say a big thank you to my patrons and a special thank to top tier patrons: Shunak, Sibev, Jose Bailey, Nofol Shamari, Fred, Hongching Kwang, Paul Louis Agenot, Patrick Button, Jeff Lee, Tayab Matin, Nick, Brandon, Jem Siddle, Ojoal, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Corey G, Tristan, Christopher, Jan, Donage, Alex, Christopher France, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. That's it for me, that's it for today. I'll see you very, very soon. Salut! I can't film this because I don't have connections to the internet, and I'm probably gonna have to go back to my office to make sure I can upload the video. What a day!